Dr. Grant Killion, who is an elder here at the church at Pyburn Street, and who has been in service to his God for many years. Grant is 75 years old. He was born in Booneville, Arkansas back in 1938. He went to school there for a while, then they moved to Oklahoma for a while, and then to the wonderful city of Springdale, Arkansas. And this is where our families actually met. Even though Grant is a few years older than me, I knew his younger sister, Sue, at Springdale, and we were raised under the same elders and really have had many of the same experiences. So I'm very honored to be here today with Grant and to listen to his story as well as to share in it.
Thank you, Dennis, for those kind words. Dennis McCarty has been a great help to this congregation, and I'm glad that I had part of getting him up here. He's done a great work here. We hope he'll stay another 62 years, and he's really helped us. I wanted to talk a little bit, just casually, and I know I have friends that have already passed on that didn't get to hear my life story, but some of them are still living, and I still have some people that know me, so I appreciate the opportunity. Deborah, we thank you for doing this work. Deborah's my daughter. I'm proud of her. What I want to talk about is the beginning. I thought I'd give a little background to myself because that's where all of our lives start. Everybody we meet could give us a story and tell us pretty much what I'm doing here, just a little different ending or whatever we have in our lives may be different, but we're more alike than we're unlike. I was born, as Dennis said, in Booneville, Arkansas, a house outside of town. And on June 14th, 1938, I was a premature baby, and the doctor said, if we can get him through the summer, I think he'll make it. Well, Lord willing, I made it. And those were hard times for my family and myself. And I was the first child, and 9 years later, my sister Sue, that Dennis referred to, was born, Sue Carroll. And we were very poor. But you know, a lot of people were poor back then, before the war. And Hitler was getting ready to invade Poland, and the world was uneasy, and new things were going to happen. Still coming out of the Great Depression. And my father was a very hard-working man, manual labor. He had no education much. He had to quit his senior year to help make the crop. They thought they were going to have a failure. And so he had to get in and do that, so he didn't get his diploma. My mother left school at the 8th grade to take care of her family. That probably sounds like a lot of stories people could tell of that day and time. But I believe we were poorer than most of the poor of that day. When we moved to Oklahoma about 2 years after I was born, I was just a small child, but I can remember it very clearly. The little old house that we lived in was just a shack. It's all Dad could afford. And he walked 5 miles to work and 5 miles back. He'd get home late at night for $1.25 a day, working in Stark's nursery in Oklahoma. And he never was without a job. But his goal, he and my mother, was for her to stay at home, take care of the kids, and keep the house and have dinner ready and all of those things that many women did back then. And it was difficult. It was hard times. Glad to get any kind of job we could get. And I remember the house that we lived in. I used to hear stories about Abraham Lincoln. He, as you remember, if you've read about Abraham Lincoln, lived in a log cabin, and he studied in front of the fireplace where he'd have light and warmth. And I used to think, boy, that's great. He had a fireplace. We just had an old coal stove. But I'm kidding, of course, but it was very difficult for us. And then we moved to Springdale, where I attended the public schools there, 12 years. And I graduated in 1957 as valedictorian. It was a good school, not nearly as big as it is now, of course. Springdale was about like 7,000 or 8,000, I think, about that time when I graduated. And I became acquainted with the Top Street Church of Christ. My mother and I, she was of a a background that was more of the, we would say in sometimes some circles, the aunties, they didn't believe in supporting orphans' home and a few other things. No located preachers. But anyway, we both moved. She moved first and I moved then to Thompson Street Church of Christ. I was baptized September the 17th, 1955. And I met some really fine men then. Dennis, I think, referred to some of the experiences about this with himself. But I remember James L. Neal, who was very kind to me. He never could teach me singing, Dennis. I never learned it. He tried, but I couldn't do it. My voice was, I couldn't recognize the notes, I guess. And then there was Bill Grady, the junior high principal, who was very good to me, and we learned a lot. He was like an older brother, and he was always interested in encouraging me to go to Harding, even though he himself didn't go, so he wasn't able. But I did, and also I can think of other people such as Mac Layton. Now, Mac was a great inspiration to me, and I copied a lot of his preaching style. I didn't mean to, I just did. He had a relaxed style, someone like Dennis. And it was very good. Every little sermon was just a perfect little gem. And I loved that, and I loved to preach, and I got really interested in it. And they took us out preaching. Some of the men that worked, I can't remember all their names now, but they would take us out, us boys, and scatter us out around the countryside, and we'd speak. I remember, even though I'd had sermons there at South Thompson, that my first sermon was at Antioch, Missouri. And a long way up there. And here two of the brethren took me. I wasn't even driving at that time, had no vehicle anyway. But, boy, I had everything ready. I was really excited to go do this. It lasted 6 minutes. And I'll never forget that one of the ladies said, that was the shortest sermon I ever heard, but it was one of the best. Said, that's what we need all the time. I was not sure exactly what she meant by that, but they were wonderful people. I appreciated them. I worked for W.S. Camp department stores. There were two in Springdale at one time. Pretty good size, one of them, and I started there sweeping the floors when I was 13. And he liked me. And Charlie Camp liked me, so he had intentions of putting me in there with more work, and he would give me more work. I'd work on Saturdays and other times. I had to quit my ball playing or else quit the job, so I quit the ball playing with the American Legion. I did play in high school, but he would want me to work all I could. And I still remember Mr. Camp would put out money. He did it for all his employees, I suppose, but he was trying me out. I remember when it happened. He'd lay $3 or $4 around here and there, and I'd say, Shelley, here's Mr. Camp, here's $3 somebody left back there. Oh, did they? Well, I found out later that he said, I was just checking on you. I knew you wouldn't take it, but I had another one that I was suspicious of, but I knew you wouldn't. But that was his way. He was a good man. He worked hard. I worked till 10:30 on Saturday night. And all of that, I worked there all the way through high school. And I didn't have any way to go to college. I had a small scholarship, but back then they didn't have the assistance they do now to get you in college. So I did get that. I started to attend the University of Arkansas, stayed one semester, and I was kind of discouraged with it. I was majoring in geology. And I felt, hey, this is not right for me. I don't want this. I wanted to work for Phillips Oil Company because they had a number of geologists that we were familiar with that come over from Tulsa. But I lost interest, and by this time I loved to preach. I wanted to do that, so I thought I'm going to get in Harding some way. I had to work another year after high school to try to go first to Oklahoma Christian, and that didn't work out. I couldn't financially do it. And then by the end of the summer, I was determined that maybe some way it could be done. I sold my 53 Ford that I was so proud of. I think about all I did was pay it off, about what I owed. And I borrowed $300. And I took my old beat-up leather suitcase and some boxes, 2 boxes, I think, and that held everything I owned. My parents, of course, could still, at this time, still not help me with anything. But anyway, I went to Harding. A friend of mine, his father took us down there. So at Harding, my career began. I sent out 50 postcards just as soon as I could to places around there I thought might be interested in having a preacher part-time, and only got one back, and that was from New Blaine, Arkansas. Guy Lipe, who was one of the leaders there, said, "Come on down and preach for us. They might be interested." Now, New Blaine is 125 miles from Harding. You go to Dardanelle and then up the highway up that direction toward New Blaine. You go down that old highway. And I thoroughly enjoyed the work there. It was one of the best things I'd ever done. We had, for example, a Bible school, vacation Bible school one summer that I was there. I was there like 2 years, I think. And we had like 80 or 85 kids from that country. And if you've ever been there, at that time there was hardly anybody, but they came. We took cars, went everywhere finding kids, looking around and bringing them in, and it was wonderful. We thoroughly enjoyed it. So that was a good experience. And I've got to take time, Debbie, if I could, I've got to put this in about one of the sweetest people I've ever met. Her name was Isla Brock. Her husband was named Tom. Both of them together wouldn't weigh what I weigh now. But she was not a Christian. Tom was. But she fell in love with me. She said, "You got to eat with us. You need to eat with us more." Well, others wanted me to have that pleasure too. Maybe that's why I'm the size I am. All these good people want to feed us. But anyhow, she found out I liked her strawberry rhubarb pie. Boy, it was good. I can taste it right now. And so she would plan so that every week or so, seemed like it was every week, but I guess it was every week or so, that night, Sunday night, she'd say, "Here's your rhubarb pie. I hope you enjoy it." I'd put that in the back window of the car, and I'd head back to Searcy. And boy, Monday was a good day, because I had a lot of dessert that day. They were wonderful people. I baptized her. She was 87 years old when I baptized her. About the same as her weight, I imagine. But in the river, too, by the way. They didn't have baptistry. And those are just some of the things, and I know Dennis or any of us that have preached have had many, many experiences like that. As I think about it, those times back then were such an enjoyable time. I preached for several congregations while I was at Harding. Choctaw was one of them. And that was a wonderful place, too. I was there when we moved. They moved the building from off the lake where Greer's Ferry would be. Lake, is that it, Greer's Ferry? They moved it, and I remember going down there where it was still filling up, and they said, "Now the river's going to come to right there," and there was a stake in the ground. And so help me, that's exactly where it came. Boy, I was amazed at that, how accurate they could be. And they moved the building. The government moved it and helped them and restored the building quite a bit. And that was really a good work, too, I can tell you. I'm just telling you about some of my experiences because that's impressionable to me. It made a great impression. And it was at Harding that I found a little brunette that took my heart, and she had such a sweet smile, such a loving disposition. That's when I married Carol Ann, is right after I got out of Harding, and she still had a semester to go. That didn't go too well with the parents. They wanted her to finish, but I wasn't going to let her be down there by herself for a semester. So we worked it out, and she later completed her degree and even got a specialist degree and came on up and taught at the Black River Technical College for 30 years. But our goal was, here was our plan, I'll tell you. This may be boring to some, but it's my life, and I guess everybody ought to have something about their life before they have their funeral sermon. You don't hear much of that. But when we got married, we wanted her to stay at home, and I'd work and try to make the living. But I forgot I was in Randolph County, Arkansas, and jobs were not plentiful. And if you got one, which we were very fortunate, it didn't pay much. I was teaching. I also loved to teach. And in teaching, I had a small income, and I've always preached for whatever the congregation where I wanted to preach was giving. If it was $25, fine. I got 25 at New Blaine. That wasn't very much, but I used whatever it was wisely. And I think that I just was about at the end of the rope. I didn't know how I was going to make it. I went ahead and got a master's degree so I could qualify to teach. I majored in Bible at Harding, and that's a no-no. If I had my way, if the preacher wasn't going to preach full time, or if he thought he might just want something else, you better have at least 2 majors, maybe in teaching. Have one of them or something else he can do. Because we got hungry a few times. And but the Lord never let us down. That's one reason I'm telling this story. And consequently, I finally decided that by piecemeal, a year here and semester there, I'd get a doctorate from Ole Miss with the intention of, and though I love Randolph County and the people here, I'd want to move to a bigger school district and make a living where Carol wouldn't have to work. But that didn't work out, but you bloom where you're planted, and that's what I tried to do. So we made it fine, and we made so many friends. I said this at our 50th wedding anniversary. Everybody's been so good to us, and we've tried to return the favor. We've tried to be good to them. And Carol, of course, loves everybody. She thinks she's kin to everybody, too. Maybe, I don't know. But with me, we always appreciate, we'll always appreciate what people have done. And then I wanted to be able to have some time left. I know if you've listened to all of that now, maybe if you're still with us, you'll hear the rest. That's the good thing about a recording. You see, you can just pass all the stuff I just said and get right into the rest of it where you can really get something. But I would like to tell you that I've learned something. I've learned several things, believe it or not. And some of those things that I've learned is that some of the sweetest, best people in the world are in small congregations. That's all I've ever preached for. I think the largest would be Skaggs. I was there 6 years, and back then we had about 187 in attendance, or 185. Preached also all over Randolph County. I've preached in adjacent county or two, McDougall, over there in that county. We loved that work. I was there like 6 years. And we thoroughly enjoyed it. I've learned this. The sweet people are there. And secondly, I learned that you got some bullies there too sometimes. You got some people with egos. Some, even preachers, believe it or not. Would you believe that? There are preachers with big egos. You have to open both double doors. Open the doors up and let them come in sideways. They're so proud of themselves. I never did like that attitude and never will. And so I tried not to be that way. I don't think I ever was. And I also learned that you have a Diotrephes here and there. You know what 3 John says about him. Well, that's exactly the way some of them are. They're going to give you the idea they're running the show. They even use those terms sometimes, even if they're not an elder. Or if they were an elder, it'd be wrong. You can't be lords over God's flock, it says. But the attitude is that I'm trying to get to perhaps some young person or young couple that might want to preach part-time, is that you got to work around them or work with them. If you hit them head on, you'll have a moving experience. They will not tolerate it because they've run the show so long. One particular place, I said to a couple of 3 of the men, why are you all tolerating this? You know that he's a Diotrephes and you ought to do something about it. He's not qualified as an elder because of his attitude. Why don't you talk to him and say, this has to change? Well, we know that's right. You're speaking like a leader, but, well, you fill in the blank. They didn't want to do it. It happened. It had gone on so long, and they didn't want to change that, afraid it would cause trouble. Well, he was already causing trouble and discouraging people and things like that. I've also learned that there are some really fine Bible students in some of our smaller churches. I could name names of individuals that were as sharp on the Bible and understanding of it as any man I've ever met. And Yet on the other hand, see back the other way, you'll find some that do not study, do not know. And I'm afraid that's happening in a lot of churches, big and small, today. We just don't know God's book. We just have not really studied it. We're listening to the social gospel, and we're taking on, believe it or not, I never thought I'd see this day, for people to start picking up the first Christian church doctrine of the 1960s and so on era. Those times when the statement is, we're not the only Christians, we're Christians only. I don't know if they understand what they're saying when they say that. We all don't want to judge. There's not one of us that's judging. But you're not judging when you tell people how to become a Christian. That's God's plan. I didn't do that. That's what God wants. And when you tell them that simple plan and they think that, well, that's okay, but these other ways are okay too, that person is liberal. I don't care how you describe it or how sweet you want to say it. And there's a lot of that hitting today. I won't, not my intention to name names in churches and so on, because that's not the purpose of this. But I want younger people, young families and couples to know that you've got to know what the New Testament church is. I'm going to try to leave some things behind for my grandchildren. My youngest daughter, Brenda, and Steve, her husband, know about the Lord's church. They understand it. But by the time my grandkids are, say, 40 years old or older, I don't know if people will even preach on why be a member of the church or not. I want to leave them a couple of copies of Why I'm a Member of the Lord's Church, the New Testament Church by Leroy Brownlow and some of these. Always good stuff, always things they need to read. People just don't understand. I saw this coming years ago, but I didn't believe it'd get this bad. And also I've learned something else too, and that is that we're all human. We all make mistakes. I'm sure I made mistakes when I was working with small congregations, and I think they saw me for what I was, that sometimes if I didn't say it quite right, they forgave me. I was apologetic. Didn't happen very often, but I know that we all have our weaknesses. And folks that have been raised with one idea are not going to change very quickly, are they, Dennis? No. They will not change just because you say, well, here's what the Bible says, and so on. And this thing that's facing the church in regard to marriage and divorce, the issues about that, are very detrimental to the church. And I feel like people need to be teaching on it. I believe that's best done, not necessarily just from the pulpit. That could be mentioned now and then. But in our classes, from the time young people are thinking about marriage and so on, that's where it ought to start. And to talk about what are the issues and what is right and what's God's plan for marriage. But now, as I look back, I think I've always said if a couple wanted me to marry them, I'd say, well, do you have a right to be married? And I'd explain what I meant by that. If I had reason to think they had been married before, I said, did you have a scriptural reason? The reason for this, and then I'd quote the passages, Matthew 19:9, 5:32 of Matthew, and so on. And you know what? I never once had one to say, well, you know, you may be right. We might ought to reconsider that. They've always said, no, we're free. We know that's right. We're perfectly comfortable. I have been uncomfortable myself a time or two. But I've just about quit marrying people if they've been married before, unless I know that they have a right to be married, like a widowed person or someone of this nature. The lack of teaching and the lack of understanding on this subject, people just scoffing at it like it's not even important, is a big detriment to the Lord's church. It's hurting people. And that's just one example. Overlooking things that ought to be changed, ought to be done. People's lives need to truly repent. But I'm not standing in judgment, but I am saying all that could be solved if we go back to God's Word. And so I've learned through all those experiences that, you know, I'm weak too. I have my problems, my difficulties. But I really would like to see people get more into the Word again. And I hate to keep referring to Dennis here. I'll embarrass him in a minute. But he gets down to issues that are needed. And he talks about things from the Bible that we need to know. And that's the way it ought to be. And that's what I've always tried to do too. And what would I say to the people at the Lord's church now that are coming up? Love God's Word. Don't listen to what's the social gospel out there now, according to some of our brethren. That everybody's okay. I'm okay, you're okay. I thought we had left that in the denominational world years ago. And now we picked up some of that stuff. And anyway, stay with what's right. Now, in thinking about what would be best, I'm no judge really as to what would be best, all the things considered. I'd say also, and would say to my grandchildren, be careful what translations you use. All of them are pushed as being just one good as another, and there are some things that I could show you if we had time, and if we wanted to do it, that you better beware of some of the translations, because they're teaching doctrines like faith only, and things like this thing for pushing that in some of their translations. Look at the committee who translated it, and talk to people that are Greek and Hebrew scholars that can tell you what the words really mean. That take a real thorough study, but that's what it's going to take, because there are many, many false teachers out there now. There was when I was growing up, but it's getting worse. I don't want to leave that on a sour note. I don't want you to think that I'm bitter, but I am concerned. This is a very concerned Grant that you have in front of you. The time is coming when people that love God's Word are going to have to stand up and speak up a little plainer and a little louder. So I would give you that encouragement, and always love the Lord, love His truth, appreciate His grace and mercy. We're all in this together. We're all trying to get to heaven. And the only way you can do that is to please God. I think a daily dose, or at least a weekly dose, of Matthew chapter 7, 21 to 23 would help us all. It's not what you say. It's not what you claim. It's not what deeds you do. But it's whether or not you do the Lord's will. We don't want to stand in the day of judgment and Him say, I never knew you. You were never mine. Now, as I conclude what I'm about to say, I want to end on maybe a little more personal note than I ordinarily would. I wouldn't even, I guess, discuss this with a congregation or something as far as a sermon. I don't know what the future holds for me. There are some things in my life with my health that are very difficult. I'm coming up on about a little more than a month from now. I'll have a test to determine what action should be taken concerning a heart problem. Already had other problems, and because of the number of issues, I've been told they don't want to operate on me. So that being the case, I'm going to need your prayers, and I know many of you care about Carol and me. And we appreciate that and hope that you'll keep praying. By the time you see this, if you're seeing it several months from the time it was made, things will have already happened one way or the other. But I believe in God's providence. And I want you to pray that God will help Carol and help me and my family as we go through this. We walk by faith and not by sight, and so that's what we have to do. And we still believe the best. If I live, I'm going to try to do the best I can. I don't know how long I could be an elder. I have such pain all the time from other problems. But I'd like to serve a little longer. And what a joy it is to preach the gospel. I was glad I got to teach in the public school systems, because that way I didn't have to depend on churches that didn't have the money to have preachers. And that's been a benefit to me, and I believe that that's helped others. At least I think so. And I never was asked to leave a congregation, and I've never been turned down to come to a congregation. If I asked to come and they tried me out, they'd always say yes. Now, isn't that something? I'm proud of that. One time, though, it was a little congregation in Oklahoma, and they said, come on out. I was thinking about going to the University of Oklahoma then. Come on out. We think we can use you. Well, okay. I drove out there all the way from Harding I was still in school. And Carol and I were planning to get married. And I got there and noticed it was kind of cold and indifferent. But anyway, I preached and did the best I could. And they said, well, we didn't know how to tell you this, but we've already hired somebody else. And I said, well, I wish you had told me, because the trip was kind of expensive. And that's a long way. Even then, gasoline, as cheap as it was, it still took something. I did have to eat once in a while. But they said, well, we're going to pay you anyway. And I said, well, that's nice. I appreciate that. And you all, I hope you have a good preacher coming in for you. And they gave me $15. So that was that. And but all the other times, people have loved me, and I've tried to do the best I could to help. And so that's my little story. Everybody has their own story. But thank you for listening to mine. And if I can encourage you in some way, maybe this will help a little. Thank you.
Grant, if you can, tell us something about what was going on in your life around the time that you were baptized, and who baptized you, and what your feelings were then.
Yes, okay. As I said, I was with my mother. My dad was not a Christian. I wish I'd have talked about that. I baptized him years later, and I was glad of that. But my mother was of the persuasion of the conservative, no Sunday school type. I don't know what they are about. So we were attending the Hawkins Street Church of Christ, and Kermit Lynch, who was a professional softball player in California, was holding a meeting there, and very, very powerful speaker. I was a young kid, but 17, but it was very touching. But I didn't respond, so Saturday morning hadn't even got my shoes on yet. My friend and I were going to go to see the Arkansas Razorbacks play SMU. You get the bleacher seats for 50 cents if you get there and stand there for 2 hours. But he came, and I was standing there on the porch, and he said, I thought I was going to baptize you last night. He had one of the elders with him from down there. And I said, well, I thought about it. He said, well, how about right now? So I said, all right, I will. So I did that. I was baptized, and we didn't go to the game that day. The friend of mine, we stayed home. But they were good people. They were very, very conservative and even radical on some things. But that's what was going on. And I was so interested in Mac Layton's preaching and some of the others. Brother Neil was working all that time on my dad and myself. So that's how that all came about.
Now, there are a lot of young people, young men who are thinking about preaching, but who will never have the experiences that we've had growing up, because the churches are doing things differently today than they used to.
Absolutely.
We don't have as many gospel meetings as we used to have.
Right.
But there's a story from your history about a gospel meeting. I can't remember where it was held, where they forgot to pay you.
Yes, that was interesting. I won't mention the name. I don't want to embarrass anybody there. And I just happened to find out about it because one of my friends was preaching there. And he said, hey, Grant, I got to tell you something funny. This was months later after we'd gone down. Carol and I went down and stayed in a motel for a week and ate with the brethren. And I didn't know how much they were going to pay. I never asked. They didn't say how much would it take. I just said, we'll be there. And the last night of the meeting, they said, well, you're going to have to stay around a while. We're going to have to figure out what to pay you. And I thought, well, that sounds a little odd, doesn't it? So my friend who was in the meeting later told me, he said, well, what they did was they said, well, how much did we pay Brother Killion? Well, I don't know. I wish we'd have thought of that sooner. But I'll tell you what, Sunday now, both sermons were really good. I think that's worth $25 myself. And then Monday night it was good, maybe 20. And now Monday night, Tuesday night I guess didn't seem like he was feeling very good or something there. That's 15. And that's how they figured my salary. I believe it was like $180 or something like that. And it was mentioned, well, don't forget we paid his motel bill. And I laughed about it because I knew they didn't know. That's just some of the, I might as well say the word, the ignorance that you get into sometimes. And I'm not that smart, but I know better than that. You decide up front what you're going to pay a man. It comes for a meeting, but that was interesting.
Today we've been talking with and listening to Dr. Grant Killion, who is an elder here at the Pyburn Street Church of Christ in Pocahontas, Arkansas. And Grant has been preaching in Randolph County and surrounding counties for over 40 years, and it's been really enjoyable for me to sit here and listen to his story. And I'd like for us to put that on our website as well as other places. But hopefully it's been beneficial to you, uplifting to you. Like he said, everybody has a story. And God knows what these stories are. Now, we're making a video, a DVD of this, and we would like to do many more of other gospel preachers in our northern Arkansas area, just to kind of make a history of some of the experiences that our men have had over the years. Thank you for joining us.